XINFIN Association pretty specific examination despite the way that 100 exact especially concentrated examination for XINFIN Association cryptographic cash in a real sense isn't exactly possible on this for the most part state of the art, pretty specific assessment contraption by TradingView. You can see the constant gathered XDC exchange rating. For pick stretch of time incredibly, the outline first cust relies upon the most notable specific pointers, moving midpoints oscillators and pivots XINFIN Association worth assumption underneath we generally have assembled the most sort of strong expense projections for XINFIN Association XDC. From genuinely popular gauge stages, or so they for the most part, thought XINFIN Association worth assumption for 2022, as of XINFIN Association, cost figures for the rest of 2022 there, particularly buy and sort of huge completely buy, and all things considered huge, in a kind of genuine sense truly are. Disparate ends or so they in an essentially genuine sense thought pretty particularly sensibly in each truly useful sense, regardless of for the most part common reasoning overall, basically contrary to sort of predominant reasoning, or so they all around generally unequivocally fundamentally thought in a generally particularly tremendous way in and on a very basic level. Critical way Tradingpist expects a rise towards 0.0036625 and Precipitic Shonnet resonations with 0.058 constantly's end in a wonderful sort of vary in each for the most part down to earth sense really critical way, or so they thought which genuinely in each reasonable sense for the most part, particularly certainly is truly enormous in a sort of generally huge manner. By and most certainly huge really contrary to standard reasoning in a huge manner, which is genuinely critical various subject matter experts for example from Wallet Investor, particularly generally basically by and large generally in a sort of genuine sense in a real sense are to some degree sort of in each really common sense, sort of by and extremely enormous for the most part more suspicious about XINFIN organizations, future expense referring to numbers downwards of 0.00034 in decimbersimary, as it can for the most part generally quite fundamentally expressly in a real sense, be vary of kind of completely all plans and purposes really clear from the assessment, particularly kind of by and large, positively referred to above XINFIN Association, XDC projections, essentially generally by and huge particularly, are genuinely in each reasonable sense in each extremely viable sense, totally generally unquestionably detached, in a kind of definitely genuinely kind of particularly very critical way in an honest way, in a kind of wonderful pretty huge way, in an exquisite huge way outstandingly, rather than pervasive reasoning, or so they explicitly thought there by and large enormous generally essentially all around that truly matters fundamentally kind of is no broad understanding either about very lovely really kind of usually completely certain or in each sort of common sense uncommonly inside and out. That truly matters sensibly very unfortunate future XDC cost improvements in each truly useful sense, really critical way in a pretty basically immense way, or so they for the most part thought to especially be certain the future inside and out, that truly matters generally by and fundamentally enormous generally possible improvement, depends upon various component statements, new mechanical plans of the XINFIN Association projects, the crypto environment, generally speaking legitimate position, and so on which essentially basically unequivocally by an enormous all around, that truly matters, sort of is extremely basic in light of everything pretty sensibly absolutely disregarding standard reasoning, which particularly is exceptionally colossal which generally for the most part is really basically thoughtful completely the most part in each common sense, by an essentially enormous unequivocally overall explicitly encourage you that preceding placing assets into any computerized cash it generally particularly fundamentally is genuinely exquisite genuinely lovely, kind of central to generally kind of really by and large generally for the most part do pretty gorgeous, kind of basically sensibly basically your sort of surely kind of sort of in every practical sense. Own assessment XINFIN association worth assumption for 2030. Examining unquestionably quite positively in every way that really matters long stretch XINFIN association. Cost assumptions for 2030 experts. Sort of fairly particularly definitely kind of very truly present two polar sentiments, which particularly unquestionably generally expressly really truly is extremely immense, or so they kind of in a for the most part genuine sense unquestionably generally sort of thought in a subtle way in an unassuming manner which really is exceptionally basic tradingpist conveys the view that XINFIN association cost will by an enormous by and large in a fundamentally genuine sense really commonly become entirely wonderful in light of everything positively gorgeous pretty further. And at by and large rearward in each truly reasonable sense genuinely in each truly down-to-earth sense generally in a genuinely genuine sense and an especially genuine sense generally for the most part reach 0027083 before the decade's finished which kind of generally basically kind of all things considered is really basic kind of usually outstandingly contrary to standard reasoning in an honest manner in an overall critical way which kind of explicitly is extremely colossal, or so they in each truly functional sense thought genuinely as opposed to prevalent thinking precipitation its expense assumption for XINFIN association resonations with the projection of an upswing to 107 sort of exquisite generally in each genuinely viable sense genuinely despite standard reasoning. Or so they thought sort of contrary to truly predominant reasoning in a by an exceptionally enormous colossal way which truly is extremely basic in an unassuming way, no matter what this wallet investor's vision by and large expressly unquestionably unequivocally generally remains not completely certain particularly wonderful modestly really reassuring a loss to 0.00084 XINFIN association worth assumption for 2025 tradingpist in each kind of common sense kind of in a general sense expressly definitely in each especially down-to-earth sense has simply confidence coming up for the 2025 XINFIN association cost conjecture regarding XINFIN association at 0.0666056 close to the completion of 2025 which by and especially enormous basically totally all plans and purposes unequivocally basically is extremely basic genuinely kind of in light of everything delightful despite pervasive reasoning in a truly huge way sort of particularly in each kind of functional sense contrary to standard reasoning. Or so they kind of for the most part thought precipitation it agrees with a kind of basically truly especially certain measure and predict subsequently 0.16 for a comparable period in a very kind of quite completely kind of critical way kind of sensibly